morning, everyone, and welcome to Aligned, Engaged, Fulfilled, the podcast that delves into the very nuanced world of career development and business growth. On this show, we challenge the status quo of workplace culture, and we dive into the work it takes to build transformative and human-centric workplaces where people and purpose drive profits, not the other way around. I'm your host, Clarence Moore, and today we're joined by manager guru Lynda Harvey, a leadership development expert with over 20 years of experience in helping teams and leaders grow. With a master's in management and leadership, Lynda spent years mastering the science of organizational success, focusing on customer experience and leading high-performing teams. But she noticed a critical gap that a lot of us have experienced firsthand. New managers were often promoted based on performance, yet left unprepared for the human side of leadership. Today, as the founder of Leveled Up Leadership, she's dedicated her career to closing that gap. She believes that leadership isn't a title you're given, but a skill set that you develop, rooted in clarity, accountability, and authenticity. This conversation will explore how emerging leaders can navigate the pressures of the modern workplace, develop a leadership style that's uniquely their own, and move from feeling overwhelmed to making a real impact. Hi, Lynda, and welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here and joining us for this conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about all of the things.
I'm so excited. When I started seeing your post, I was like, I have to talk to this girl. Like, she is saying all the things that need to be said when it comes to management. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah, let's get into it.
So I want to start with something that you said in a recent post. You said, and I quote, "This is for the overachievers, the ones staying late, picking up the slack, trying to prove their worth. You can't fix a toxic workplace. You outlast it or you walk. Let me say what most people are too polite to admit. No amount of hustle will fix a place that thrives on chaos. No level of loyalty will shift a culture that protects poor leadership. And that's not your failure. That's the system doing what it was built to do." I saw that and I just felt like you were talking to me, an overachiever, someone who's ambitious or maybe naive enough to think that we can fix toxic workplaces. So I want to talk about this. Give me your perspective on why you think you can't fix a toxic workplace.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I don't know. I think that we've all probably had experiences in our work life where
Yeah.
maybe we've been like, oh my God, this place is so toxic. But I actually had an experience. And it's actually fundamentally kind of where I really kind of came from when I started my journey to when I started my company, and when I started my consulting, and when I started my company. It came from the fact that I had left someplace that was very toxic.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking like, and as somebody who prides herself very much on her work and prides herself on my output, right? And I don't like to put my name on anything that I don't feel good about, right?
Yeah.
Um, I had found myself in this place where I felt like I was just like overwhelmed, and like nothing was good enough there, or nothing was right. And the weird thing about this environment was that I felt like in my career I had had the most experience, the best way to set me up for this job. I felt the most prepared for this job that I had ever felt in my entire career, which was a weird feeling. Like, I think so often we feel the imposter syndrome, right? Like we feel inundated of like, oh, am I really getting it right? Do I really know what I'm doing? And this was the first time in my life that I was like, yes, I absolutely know what I'm doing. I absolutely know how to show up for my team. I absolutely can do this. And every day I left going, what is going on? How can I feel so confident? How can I feel so ready? How do I have the right answers and still feel like I'm failing all of the time? And I kept thinking, well, maybe if I show up harder, maybe if I work on my PTO, which I'm adamantly against, by the way, maybe if I do this thing, maybe if I kiss ass a little bit more, like maybe if I do this, the light's going to go on, right? The light's going to go on for these people who I'm working with and working for. And they're going to be like, yeah, you got this. But it didn't. Like it didn't. And I felt so overwhelmed, and I just felt like, what can I do? And I started to physically manifest illness
Yes.
because of this. And I just thought, how many people are out in the world who are like this? Like, how many people? And I will tell you, there's another really great creator on TikTok as well. His name's Philip Holmes. And he says he was a lot of the inspiration for this particular post because he said something similar. And he talks about his experience. And I remember feeling very heard by him. And I thought, how can I help others feel really heard? How can I help them feel seen? How can I help them understand that you can't fix a broken system? You can show up, you can provide feedback, and you can do all of the things. But if the environment, or if it starts from the top, and after I got out of this work situation, I really analyzed and looked at my senior leadership, because I had, I was fairly senior with this company and I had a lot of exposure to senior leadership. I wasn't just a mid-level manager. And I really took stock going, it was sanctioned, it was that trickle down culture. It was such a trickle down culture, but it was also like, so, everything was siloed and everything was, but then everything needed to be sanctioned. And I just was like, ugh. And it was that moment where I went, okay, like, okay, and I just think that so many people, especially I think in like the Zennials, I think that's what they're calling us now. Like I'm a
Gen
last
X.
holdout to that Gen X, but like probably a millennial. And I think that we have been fed like this idea of like, if you just work harder, if you just show up harder, if you do the things just a little bit better, it's going to move the needle.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's okay to say, no, it's not going to. And when you're in a toxic environment, it's critical for you to understand that this is a big, like there's a big picture, there's a big system, and you are just a piece of that system. And so you can't fix it. And so you really do have to like figure out how to get out of it or figure out how to survive it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think, as I after I met you and as I prepared for this episode, I really dove into your content, which is, I must say it's great content, but I will say that I think you are fixing the system. You are doing the things that need to be done to fix a toxic system, just not internally. You're doing it from the outside. And one of the reasons, when when we talk about, or in my consulting practice, I do consulting with businesses and I do career coaching with clients, because the way that I see it, we can't fix this problem of toxic workplace or the management crisis from one side. It has to come from both sides and they have to meet in the middle.
Right.
And so I do think that the work that you're doing works to solve this problem for what that's worth.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think a lot of change, right? Change happens when we start naming things, right? When we give something a name and when we give it life. And so if people can hear this message or they can hear those things and it falls on the right ears,
Yes.
then people do have a moment to take stock. And, that's why I really started trying to develop this content, was to help people feel seen, feel heard. But also, like, I think that we start to create this idea, especially when you're in management. And management is such a solitary place, and you're lonely and you have nobody that you can go share your information with. And you start to get in your brain of like, oh, it's just me. I'm just crazy. I'm just the one who's making this all up in my brain, or I'm doing this. And sometimes we just need to be seen, and we need to know like, no, it's not just you. It's not just you. And so that's really what I hope to kind of help, is like let people know it's not just you. And then we give name to things. And then hopefully we can like figure out how to navigate, because sadly we all have to work, right? We're all working. So let's navigate it better.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things that you do really well with your content is you don't just name it, right? And this is one of the things that frustrates me about a lot of creators that I see, is that they just call it out. They just name the problem. They don't go into the next part of that, or the next phase of that, which is to talk about how we fix it, how we solve it. So that's something that I really appreciated with your content, is you name it, but then you also take it a step further and you say, here's how to fix it. Here's how to address it, which I think is important, right? If we're ever going to make the change happen, we have to talk about what we have to do to make the change happen.
Yeah.
So you also talk about, you've brought up a few things that kind of speak to imposter syndrome, which is, I think, something that as managers, a lot of us struggle with. So we'll dive a little bit into that. But you also specialize in helping new and emerging leaders.
Yes.
So take us into the mind of somebody who has just been promoted. They were probably a top performer and now they've moved into a manager role.
Yes.
What's the most overwhelming and maybe least talked about challenge that they're going to face in that transition?
Probably the biggest challenge that they have, well, it's twofold. First of all, they have no idea what they're doing, right? They have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10. Yeah.
They've gone from being like an individual contributor more often than not. They've gone from being an individual contributor and being probably really great at it. And they're smart and they're capable and they have drive, right? And suddenly they're handed a group of humans and they're like, and have fun with this. And nobody understands, managers do not understand all of the nuances that come with suddenly managing a group of people, all of the different personalities, all of the different troubles. And it's amazing. Like when you become a manager, you're suddenly like everyone's therapist because they tell you everything, whether you want to know it or not. And you have to decipher, like, is this something that I really should be like helping you with? Or is this something that, like I need to say like, hey, this is probably not something we should have in the conversation.
Right. Draw that line.
So that's the first thing. Then the second thing that comes with this responsibility of managing humans is you are now responsible for all of the actions of these groups of human and their productivity and their success. And suddenly you're going like, how do I do that? How can I be responsible for things I can't control? These are humans. They're not robots. I can't make them do what I want them to do. Right. But yet I'm being held accountable for that in closed door meetings. And one of the biggest thing that kind of comes from that is, so what managers do and what they're feeling is they're feeling overwhelmed. They just don't want anybody to notice. They just hope that they can hide away and like put their head under a rock and just hope that nobody notices. And they hope that they can get through their day. And that's just not feasible. And sadly, companies just don't train people like they used to. There are still major corporations that are out in the world that probably still train people, but sadly, that's not the world we live in any longer. In fact, there's a statistic out there that says 85% of new managers are not trained, right? But then what happens is they go into these roles, they're not trained, they have no idea what's going on, they're inundated, they're drinking from that fire hose. And so they just mimic whatever it is that they've seen done because they sure hope that works. Or even if it didn't work, they're like, I guess that's what a manager is. I guess that's just what they do. And then what happens is they leave that job, right? So they were crap at it. Then they leave that job and go to a new job that probably pays more, probably gives them an elevated title, whatever. And they go and repeat the process. And so
the same things.
Sometimes you find people in senior roles that are doing the same garbage they were doing 20 years ago because they're like, I guess that works.
This kind of takes me to my next question, because your business leveled up leadership is built on the belief that great leaders aren't born, they're developed.
Yep.
Which really is a direct challenge to the myth of the natural leader, right? Why do you think that myth is so persistent, and why is it so damaging to new managers?
Well, so I think that a good portion of it comes from, people start to name traits when you're young, right? People start to name your traits when you're young, and they start giving you this identity when you're young. Oh, you've got leadership ability. You command a room. I can't tell you how many times I was called bossy as a little girl, right? Which I heard somebody once refer to it as, no, she came with executive skills. So you start to get labeled, right? And I think that that's where this fallacy, and listen, we could dive in all day about nature versus nurture, right? We could talk about that. But this concept of like that a leader can't be, that you have to be born a leader, I just think is garbage, because I have met leaders, all shapes, all sizes, all ages, all personalities, that were great leaders because they wanted to be, because they showed up and they had a desire to be there. And that's where I think the big difference is. If you want to be a leader, because it's a thankless job, if you want to be a leader, you want to be in people management, that outweighs somebody who's born with leadership skills, somebody who
Right.
naturally has charisma, naturally is
100%.
willing to speak their mind because of who they inherently are. But if you want to be there and you want to show up and you want to do the things for the people, that's the difference, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I hope to really kind of uncover with people is really talk about like, why is it that you want to be here? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Like, what about this thankless job excites you?
Yeah.
And then let's tap into that. And then let's figure out how to be amazing.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important because, what I've come to learn over the last 20 years of my experience is that one of the most misused words in business is leadership, right? Like it's become this word that's often synonymous with management, which has really created the very toxic problem that you and I address in our work. And to a lot of people, it's just semantics, right? Like, but I've come to learn that semantics matter, especially in the world of business and in the world of leadership. So to you, like, where do you draw the line between management and leadership?
So first of all, I think we're all managers. I think all of us as humans are managers. We are managing one scenario or another, or, we're even managing our life. So I think that all of us are managers, right? But for me, the leadership comes in is that desire to show up for people, right? It's that way of showing up in a way that is not always comfortable for yourself, right? It's not always that thing. Stepping up when nobody else wants to, or having the difficult conversation that's really awful, but you have to have it anyway, right? That's where, and I think it still taps in very much to desire. It's people who want to be there. It's people who want to develop their team. And it's not about power, right? It's about wanting to invest emotionally with others. That's where I
Yeah,
think the difference between management and leadership really
yeah.
sits.
So I want to get your take on, because one of the things that we hear a lot when it comes to leadership is, oh, leadership isn't a title, right? Like kind of that education of it. But I think it's important to take it further because one of the things that I talk to when I talk to business leaders is that when you put somebody in a leadership role, they can't be the person that does the job anymore. Their job becomes about leading others. It's about supporting their team. What's your take on, like, again, where's that line? As a leader, are you still somebody who should be responsible for doing the work or doing some of the work? Or do you 100% shift to just like leading people and taking care of your people?
So I think that's a great question. I actually just put a post up about that where it's like managers don't know your job as well as you do, right?
Hmm.
So I think for me, the thing I tell all of my leaders, all of my anybody is never ask anybody to do something you're unwilling to do. So I think as a leader, when you're in that kind of management role is you should always be willing to like roll up your sleeves and get in and get dirty, right? You
Yeah.
should always be willing to do it. There needs to be some grace involved because you're not going to do it as well as your team. Your team is
Right.
the experts. Your team is there to do those things. And you, as a leader, should focus on removing obstacles from their path, right? So I actually used to have a little statue of Ganesh. He's the Indian god of removing obstacles. And I
Hmm.
truly believe that, like, that's my reminder every day that I need to go remove obstacles from my team's way. And if one of those obstacles means I need to pitch in and help, great. I'm going to pitch in and help. I'm going to be slow and I'm probably going to get the answers wrong. But like I'll show up for you and I'll show up and I'll carry the buckets of water, like whatever we need. But I don't think that they need to be an expert in every single function of their team's jobs because then what are they there for? Like if you're just there
Right.
to be an expert in the job, you're not moving things strategically, you're not looking at the big picture. You're not moving things forward. You're just a glorified person.
Right. Yeah. 100%. No, I think that's the perfect distinction. I also always say that we have, over time overcomplicated leadership. Like while I recognize that leadership is absolutely complex, I also think that in an effort to understand it, we've made it harder to learn. So, like, let's say that you're working with a brand new manager,
Mhm.
lesson one on day one. How would you describe, teach, or define leadership to kind of simplify it? Because I mean, you and I know there's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to leadership. And
Yep.
obviously, like you have your master's in leadership. Where do you start? How do you like a branding manager, you say, leadership is this simplified.
Yeah. So leadership for me, the thing that I tell them is that, so leadership is purely unique, right? It's purely unique to the person that I'm working with. And I think that that's the big thing that a lot of people get wrong, is that there's only a cookie cutter way to do it. There's only one way to do it. And I don't believe that. I believe that, because here's the thing, you are never going to do it my way, because it's not going to deliver that way. And I'm
Right.
never going to do it your way. So the first
Yeah.
thing they need to understand is, like, leadership isn't just one thing, and it's not just one way of doing something. It is absolutely a unique process, but it is an investment in people. So
Yep.
leadership is absolutely an investment in people. And if people can understand that, if they can understand that everything that they are now going to do is going to be an investment in people,
Hmm.
they will be successful, or they'll run for the hills. But either way,
Right.
that's very good. Like,
Right.
if you hear that and you're like, that is not for me, I would much rather have somebody say, like, that is not for me, and run
Yeah.
for the hills, than I would for somebody who's internally running for the hills, but it's like, yeah,
Yeah, let me do it.
people.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think that's perfect. So a core pillar of your work, which I think speaks to what you were just talking about, is helping leaders lead with authenticity, right? And authenticity being this super important piece of what it means to lead and to manage. And so I want to go deep on that because I personally believe that the word itself is in crisis. Like we're surrounded by what I call performative authenticity, and this performance of trying to be authentic is creating a really massive trust deficit with customers, employees, and the people that we interact with. And so I've come to believe that genuine authenticity isn't really a goal to be chased, but something that, well, a byproduct that emerges naturally when a leader's actions and values are in perfect alignment.
Yeah.
So, as someone who cultivates this in new leaders every day, how does that idea resonate with you? Like, what does it really mean to lead with authenticity in today's world?
So here's what I tell new managers. I tell new managers, and I agree with you when we talk about, like, everybody's using that word. It's such a buzzword.
Such a buzzword.
And companies will be like, we want you to show up like 100% authentic. And I'm like, that's just a lie. So let's
Hmm.
just call a spade a spade. And I tell leaders this too. I'm like, never bring your whole self to work, because nobody needs to see your whole self, right? Like,
Hmm.
nobody needs to show your whole self, but you need to show up about 90%. And so if you need to say that 10%, that scrappy bar talk, that doesn't need to come in at work, right?
Hmm.
Or if you are deathly sarcastic, that's not going to land well with your team, right? So the first thing I tell them is, like, save 10% just for you. Keep that
Hmm.
10% just for you. And then show up 90%. Show 90% of who you are. And if you can show 90% of who you are in the conversation, or who you are, and if that's how you show up for people, and that's how you resonate, and that's how you are authentic at work, because you know that you can save 10% just for you and for your inner circle, and then let all the rest of the freak flags fly, right? Like, let
Hmm.
let the rest of them, and be authentic that way, and show up. If you're going to curse like a sailor, that's probably not going to fly at work. So understanding kind of those nuances, and that, I find that when people figure that piece out, they're better at providing feedback, because in their mind, especially if they're a very direct person, they'll they'll be like, well, that idea is stupid. And I'm like, well, let's not shut everything down, right? Like, let's show
Right.
up a little bit. And so it can be like, hey, I don't really understand that, but help me understand it better. Or I think it could be better if we did this, right? It gives you that path to still have those moments of truth, or those moments of authenticity,
Hmm.
but through a filter, like, just through a little bit of a filter.
Yeah.
And when people start to become comfortable with that, and they start to understand that 10% filter, they're still showing up authentically, but they're also showing up in a way that's, like, palatable for everybody else. That, and it seems to work really, really well. And I think that's when you start to find people who are showing up and are real at work, and then they don't feel like they have to force themselves into a box. They just have to leave some of that little bit out.
Yeah. So it really comes down to your ability to filter between, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate within the context. And I think that's huge because, and the reason why I asked this question is as I study leadership, authentic leadership is now a leadership style, which I think is kind of crazy. Like it suggests there's an authentic leadership style. And as a leader, we should always be authentic, right?
Yeah.
But, one of the things that I talk about in my consulting work is identity being an area where a lot of misalignment happens. And I think authenticity falls, perfectly within that. And when people don't know how to discern between what's appropriate and inappropriate and within whatever context, that's when they start to really struggle with what that inauthenticity means. So I think you define it perfectly.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, and the interesting thing, it took me until I got my master's, which is embarrassing, right? I will be very embarrassed. I had no idea that there were like education about leadership and management. I just went into it, I was like, that sounds like a good master's because that sounds like it lines up with me. And
Yeah.
to discover that there are leadership theories that have existed for decades, and the fact that everybody fits into these leadership theories kind of blew my mind. Like it was really kind of a shock for me. But one of the things that I really hit hard with my new managers is getting a basic understanding of these leadership theories.
Yeah.
And the way that feeds into authenticity is it shows you where you are, right? It shows you where you are. But then the cool thing about the theories is you can change your theory. So it's not like your birth sign. You can't change birth sign. But the theory, you can actually shift the way that you manage and who you want to be. So having an understanding of what these leadership theories are and what they mean and how they work and how you fit into these then allows you to say, okay, yeah, I feel like I really resonate here and I feel really good about this. Or for you to go like, ooh, I don't want to be there. And I had a client who went through the process, did the research, did the work, and he's like, I don't want to be known this way. And I said, great, let's change it. Let's figure out how to like shift those things. And that again feeds, I think, so well into authenticity.
Yeah.
Because you are choosing, you're making a conscious choice of this is how I choose to be. This is how I choose to show up. And I think that when you have, and I think so many people, the changes that it makes in their lives is they start showing up authentically in different parts of their lives because they take that magnifying glass and go like, this is what it is. And this is how I show up. So that's just a little plug for like my getting education and understanding. And I was so excited to learn about that.
Yeah.
But I think that helps give people an idea of how they can show up and be more authentic by understanding how they tick.
Yeah, I think that's important because, and it really is a huge lesson, I think, to take away from this podcast because, like I was saying earlier, we've overcomplicated leadership, right? With all these theories, all these leadership styles, that it almost influences people to try to fit within a box or tick a check, tick a box.
Yeah.
And most leadership education or leadership training tries to start with awareness, right? Like self-awareness, awareness of others is the most important foundation when it comes to leadership. And so using that information of theories, of styles is about awareness. And then from there, you have to make that conscious choice. So thank you for saying that because I think that is a very important distinction for a new manager to realize very early on in their leadership development is don't use these theories, these styles as a way to try to label yourself or like try to make yourself fit within whatever mold, but to have an awareness of these things. And if you fit into a combination of 5 or 10 things, that's okay, as long as you're making that conscious choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to bring in some data from Gallup because one of the reasons that I reached out to you and invited you to be on the show is because you were speaking directly to a crucial piece of the problem that I launched my company to solve, which is the management crisis. And this really stemmed from the COVID-19 pandemic where we saw people get forced into isolation, and that made us actually have time to think and assess where we are in our lives and what we want out of our careers, what we want out of life in general. And it really pulled the curtain back on, how people were treated at work and made them realize I don't want to be treated like this anymore. I'm a human and I want to be treated as such. And so, since then I started to really dive into Gallup and their work and their research. And their most recent research revealed that employee engagement is at an all-time low.
Right.
It's at 21% of the global workforce is actively engaged. But an even more important piece that they revealed is that most of that disengagement comes from managers, and they're driving the disengagement all throughout the organization. And it revealed that only 27% of managers globally are engaged in their work. What do you think is a root cause of that?
I mean, I love research and I love data so hard. And I love that you brought this to the conversation. So thank you
Yeah,
for bringing
of
that.
course.
So I think a lot of it is there's a few things. I think that you've got the generational gaps, right? I think the
Mm,
generational gaps feeds into this, right? And I think that if we were to really dive in, I've been spending a lot of time uncovering like bullying behavior at work and really kind of
yeah.
peeling back the layers on that. And I'm finding that some of the Gen X, we still have boomers in work and we still have Gen X and work. And sadly we're getting a lot of poor management from this generation, and it's because they're tired. They're tired, and they were told this lie, or they were told this story about if you just keep working harder, you just keep working harder, you can have it all. And they're like, I'm working harder and I don't have it all yet. And so I think that you have
Mm,
like part of it comes from a generational thing. And then I think that you've got the millennials and you've got Gen X that are coming in with a little bit more apathy to the
mm,
workplace and saying like, well, it doesn't matter. And, what I do doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Like the world still almost ended and we all went in lockup. So is what I'm doing mattering, right?
right.
And so I think that you've got some generational shifts and the new ideas of work and what work
Mm,
looks and feels like and what work payoff should be, right?
mm,
You've got this crushing financial situation that comes on our the younger millennials and Gen X and even some of the millennials, this crushing financial responsibility of like, how am I ever going to own a home? How am I ever going to be like pay off my debt? How am I ever going to do these things? And if I work harder, nothing's happening. And so the apathy is really coming in with this generation. And then they're like, well, does it even matter? And you've got Gen X that's tired and boomers that are tired. And so I think that that's where you get a lot of apathy. And I think that a portion of hope may have just been crushed in that.
yeah,
The hope.
it's true.
And I think that we also, I mean, we live in a society where everything is so individual, right? Like
Right.
our social media, like we scroll, we do the things, and we're so focused on our own selves and our own thing that people are lacking the bigger picture. And so I think like all of that kind of came together when we were isolated and when we were forced to just be alone. Um, and so I think that that's where a good portion of the engagement has ended.
Mm,
And I think that companies can do a better job highlighting why their engagement matters or why their work matters. Because I think that that's at the end of the day, everybody's going, does my work even matter? Does anything
yeah.
matter? No, it doesn't. And so that's where I think companies need to do a better job of, first of all, I think it starts with pay, understanding like better pay for your employees and understanding what that looks and feels like. And it's not just about like paying higher, it's more about like meaningful pay, right? Or meaningful
Mm,
benefits and
yeah.
understanding what their workforce wants
Once.
instead of just selling this big commercial lie of like, this is our
Mm,
company. It's like if your employees don't care about having a free lunch every Tuesday, stop doing it. Find
right.
something they want you to invest in. And I think it's about the disconnection. These companies have disconnection from their employees. And so they don't really know what they want. So they make up this story of what they want. And the employees are going, this is not what we want, and your frontline employees are like, stop buying me 4 t-shirts a year and give me an extra dollar an hour, right?
Yeah.
Where your senior leaders are like, let us actually take our PTO without you calling me and hounding me. So I think that it's about like that's why people aren't engaged. It's because
Right.
people are telling this story of what they think everybody wants without looking at it. But then everybody's tired or everybody's focused on themselves. And it's like, how can we as a group get that and
Get
line it back
aligned.
up
Yeah.
and take it? Which I think the work that you're doing is exactly what needs to be happening. Is, it's not just about fixing it on an employee level, it's about fixing it on a corporate level and in a company level. And stop selling me your core values, like live your core values.
Right. Yeah, so that's something that I actually say a lot is like we need to kind of scrap this idea of core values and like kind of rebrand it or, change it to be core virtues. Because the difference is when we talk about virtues, it's your behavior, it's your actions, it's what you do. And we just need to scrap this kind of broad concept of core values that really just gets slapped on the wall but doesn't really get lived and really push into this concept of core virtues. Like what do you actually do on a day-to-day basis in pursuit of living those core values? I think that's the more crucial piece.
Absolutely. I love it when a company's like, we act with speed, right? And I'm
Mm,
like, it took me 2 years to get an approval for this position. Is that acting
mm.
with urgency and speed?
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. So in your experience, when we talk about like the manager crisis itself, would you say that it's a selection problem, meaning like are we promoting the wrong people? Or is it a development problem, meaning are we taking good people and putting them into a system that really almost guarantees they will become disengaged?
I think more often than not, it's a development issue. I
Hmm.
think that it's we take these individual contributors and we promote them because they show leadership talents or abilities, right? Or they've been there the longest or they know the most, right? And so we're like, hey, go lead a team. But we don't know what that looks and feels like. And honestly, I think that it's hazing on, on like the grandest level of like, well, I did it. Here you go. Figure it out. It's sink or swim time.
Right.
And I think it's this lived experience of, well, I figured it out. So you've got to be able to figure it out. When
Right.
there wasn't this idea of like, well, I could have gotten some training. I could have gotten some knowledge. I could have done that and I could have been better. But it's just so much of like, well, I did it, so you did it. Right. So I,
Hmm.
I think that that's really where it boils down to. And then I think it's also this moment where people don't understand that they can ask for help,
Yes.
right? They don't know that they can ask for help. They know that there's a million leadership books out there and they might get curious or they might listen to a TED talk or someone like me on TikTok who says something that resonates. And so they go and they do the research because they're curious. But I think, again, and this comes from a corporate level, it's so trickle down of like people's curiosity has just been totally wiped out. People are not
Yeah.
encouraged to be curious any longer.
Hmm.
And we're just supposed to take what we're fed. And so I think that that's, again, on a corporate level, that's what happens. And then there's the whole like, oh, well, I did it. So good luck with that. So I absolutely think that it's a development issue. And that's what's creating the crisis. And again, I think when people go through development, they discover, oh, maybe this isn't for me.
Yeah.
But so often I find people leaders who've been doing it for far too long. And in our private conversations, they're like, I don't really like people. And I'm like, then stop
Hmm.
doing this. Stop.
Yeah.
But it's because nobody's investing in development.
Hmm. So when a manager does get disengaged, right? They've lacked that development. They end up, 6 months into it, starting to feel that disengagement. What would you say are the first like behavioral dominoes to fall? Like what's the immediate ripple effect that you see on their team's culture, clarity, sense of psychological safety?
So the first thing you start to notice is they stop talking to each other.
Hmm.
The team stops talking to each other because they're they're either afraid that it's doesn't matter, right? They feel like what they're saying doesn't matter, but they also feel almost observed, and nobody likes to be observed. Nobody
Right.
likes it. So if they start to feel
Hmm.
observed or they start to feel like everybody's watching them or judging them, and that's what happens when you start to have a manager that's disengaged because the manager stops behaving in a way that they should, right? They
Hmm.
start gossiping or they start trash talking the company or they complain about their job, which is like such like I cannot stand it when managers complain about their jobs. It's like this is a choice. Like this is a choice for you to be here,
Mm.
but they complain about their responsibilities. And so then the team, because we want to accommodate, humans want to accommodate each other, they stop sharing like what's going on in their lives because their managers got it so much worse than them. And so that's where I start to see the first telltale signs of disengagement is when the team doesn't talk.
So, given that landscape, I mean, given this, what we just painted, right? Your work feels much more critical than ever. So, when that struggling manager comes to you, where do you start? Like, is the first step about tactical skills, or is it about re-engaging them with their own sense of purpose and authenticity first?
I love that question so hard. It's like I set you up for this. Um, so I talk a lot about intentional leadership. In fact, that's my whole shtick. My whole
Hmm.
shtick is talking about being intentional. And, when I think about it, when I daydream, I think about like how much better would our working worlds or our jobs have been if the person who was our leader, the person who was responsible for us, wanted to be there, right? Like they really wanted to be there and they wanted to make an impact, right? They may not be able to change the world, but they can change our worlds, right?
Yeah.
So, can you imagine like if every leader showed up and was like there intentionally, they wanted to be there, they wanted to be a people leader, they understood that like they're going to be responsible for things they can't control, but they show up anyway, right?
Mm.
So, I talk a lot about intentional leadership and I talk to those leaders and we talk about what does your retirement party look like? What are
Mm.
people saying about you when you retire? What is it that you want people to, what's your legacy at work, right?
Yeah.
What are people thinking about you? And the thing is don't get in your head and think like everybody's going to like you. I have had lots of people who don't like me. That's fine, right? But I think that they would say that I showed up. Like they may not
Hmm.
like me, but I showed up. So,
Yes.
but what do you want people to say about you? And really think about that because I think we forget to that we can make those choices. We
Right.
forget that we can show up if we choose to, right? Even if we have a bad day, that's okay. We can still show up and those bad days are not going to outweigh our good days. So I say like, what do you want people to remember you for? And we go through this exercise where we talk about like what do you want people to remember and what do you want people to never say about you, because
Yeah.
you really need to discuss the duality of things. Yeah, we want people to think about these good things, but what are things we never want them to say about us? And the psychology behind that is it brings every choice that you make to the forefront. It gives you an opportunity to be like, am I going to be a hothead in this situation? Or am I going to like understand it's not that big of a deal? Right. And the shift happens with these managers immediately.
Right.
It's not a slow burn. It's you get to choose not now, but right now what that looks and feels like for you and how you get to
Yeah.
go forward. And that's the major shift. And that's what gets people more engaged with their work is when they realize the impact that they have, but they think about the long-term impact of what they're doing. And
Hmm.
then also really conscious of things they never want to show up in their work. The
Yeah.
shift happens like so fast.
I think that is the perfect answer to my earlier question about like how would you define leadership, how would you teach leadership on day one, lesson one is, and it's a word that you use a lot, since the episode started, but choice. Like it's a daily choice and an intention to be a leader. And that's probably the most true of any leadership lesson you will ever hear because it's hard, it's complex, it's dealing with a lot of factors and variables that if you're not choosing every day that you want to be a leader and you want to accept the responsibility of leading others, it's going to eat you up alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. So, I mean, and I could probably end the episode here because I think that is such a powerful lesson. But I have a couple more things I want to dive into with you. I'm curious about your take, as somebody who works in management and leadership. I'm curious about your take on movements like conscious unbossing and climbing down the corporate ladder and this push for more self-managed teams because your work is dedicated to building better managers while these trends are seemingly advocating for a world without them altogether. Do you see this as a genuine threat to the traditional management structure, or is it simply a rebranding of what good, empowering leadership should have been all along?
I don't think it's a threat to leadership and management. I think it's actually a threat to companies. I think this will be the dismantling of companies. I think when
Hmm.
companies want to take a softer approach or they want to call it something other than it is, they will have a crisis in their organization. They simply will. And I really the self-managed teams, the idea of that is like, oh, that feels really like, yeah, we're self-managed. We don't need a corporate overlord. We don't need those things. But you also need somebody who's going to show up for you. So maybe
Right.
you don't need somebody who's going to monitor every bit of your work or approve everything. We're going to empower our teams to make choices, to be curious, to do these things. But you still need someone who's going to show up for you. And that's what a
Yes.
manager should be doing. If you've got a team member that needs an exception to a policy, who's going to show up for them? Who's going to plead their case? If you
Right.
have less managers, if you have less people who are leading, nobody's going to have that employee's back. And
Right. Yeah.
so, this concept and I talk a little bit about climbing down the ladder, and I'm in full support. I'm in full support. So many people who enter into jobs are like, I guess I need to go into management. And if I want to grow, I guess I have to do these things. And it's like, no, no, we actually want the people who want to be there in there, not just because you think that that's your next step or because you think that
Right.
that's what's right, right? Like, that's not what we want.
Right.
But I think the self-managed teams are going to be the death of organizations,
Hmm.
or what they're going to end up doing, which I guess works in my favor, is they're going to have to hire people like me to come in and be like, or like to come in and be like, this is why your company is
Right.
floundering,
Yeah.
because you didn't invest in this time and taking care of your people. You
Right.
just are like, oh, we let you do you. I'm like,
Right.
no, that's not going to work.
Right. Well, that leads to a bigger paradox that I see shaping the future, and it's something that you actually brought up earlier in the conversation. But on one hand, you have these trends of unbossing, climbing down the corporate ladder, self-managed teams. And then on the other hand, we face really a demographic reality that as boomers and Gen X retire, the studies are predicting that there's going to be a massive leadership vacuum. So how do we reconcile these two opposing forces? I love the deep sigh.
That's a heavy question.
It's a heavy question, but it's a question that I think we're not asking enough, right? People are asking it, but we need to be talking about this more because it's here. It's not something that's coming. It's here.
Yeah, it is here. And again, I think it's for me, in my opinion, I think a lot of it stems from um, reevaluating how we define work, reevaluating what productivity looks like, right? And I think, again, why you've got so many people who are just not wanting to do the work anymore is they're like,
Hmm.
I got a 15% pay bump, which at the time was rad, but then I realized all the work that came with it, or the load that I had to carry it, and it's not worth it to me, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Well, that's if
why,
you're lucky to even get the 15%.
if you're lucky, right? Like, everyone thinks managers make the big bucks, and it's like they don't, right?
No?
Like there's not. And so I think it's about like understanding what productivity looks like, understanding what good looks like redefining those things, and
Hmm.
then also having an understanding of the younger generation does not want to work to death. The
Right.
younger generation does not want to do 60-hour weeks. I had a
Hmm.
management job once that said, if you're a manager, you cannot do less than 45 to 50 hours a week. And of course, because I was eager and I was like, yeah, let's do it. But now if somebody came and presented that to me, I'd be like, bye. Like,
Yeah.
next.
Right.
I would not take that role. And the younger generation has got such a better grasp
Yeah.
on work-life balance.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they've romanticized the life balance over the work.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think it's about redefining, and companies being willing to redefine and evaluate and spend better or differently than
Right.
they have been. But that's why we're having a crisis, is because people are like, I'm not going to work 50 hours a week. I want to have a life and I want to live it.
Right.
So I think that it's about like reevaluating what that looks and feels like, and altering the expectations to meet the
Yes.
needs of the new generations.
So as we look ahead and really think about what it's going to take to build transformative and human-centric workplaces, what would you say are the most crucial skills that managers and leaders have to develop to really catalyze the kind of change that we need?
First and foremost, I think it's about transparency. And that's such a buzzword. Ugh. But
Buzzwords are buzzwords for a reason.
yeah, it's about being transparent, and it's not about saying it's fine when it's not, right? It's about saying those things, and it's about showing how we're working and showing how we're showing up and documenting that, and also about us creating pushback. So here's transparency, what we're doing. This is what I'm working on, but also feeling safe to say, like, my plate is full. I cannot take on any more. And I think with those two actions, that's going to like redefine the scene.
So let's bring this back to the individual leader, because your background really highlights a deep expertise in customer experience, and something that I teach, or I talk to my clients about, is that really your employees are your first primary customers.
Yes.
So how has mastering external customer engagement informed your approach to internal team leadership? In what ways should a leader treat their employees as their most important customers?
So I think first and foremost, every business needs to understand that if they don't have a customer, they don't have a business.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm obsessed with customer service, because you have to put the customer at the center of everything that you do, right? You have to put the customer, you have to understand your customer. Who is your customer? Who are these things? And how can you build your processes around your customers, right? Then organizations need to look at their employees the same way and put them at the center of everything they do. Because guess what? If you don't have employees to show up and do the things, you don't have a business. You can't do this. And if you continue to alienate your employees, or you continue to berate your employees, or build policies that only feed the bottom line, you are going to lose your employees. Because first of all,
100%.
Loyalty is not a thing. There is no such thing as loyalty any longer. It's not like in the 50s when you got a job and you worked in that job until you retired. Nobody is doing that. You want to know why? Because every single company got rid of pensions. Like that was the initial death of the employee, is when companies killed pensions because 401ks were cheaper and they killed the pension. That is when they lost loyalty, and companies have continued to make cost cutting measures at the expense of the people who show up and make them the money.
That whole thing can be an episode on its own. Like the types of decisions that companies are making without thinking about really like the long-term implications of those decisions on the people that are charged with championing their brand is massively misunderstood.
I completely agree.
There could be a whole podcast just on that, an episode for each decision.
Well, and it's so sad. And I understand that you have to make the hard decisions, and managers have to make hard decisions. But the thing is when you go into work and you see record setting profits, and so many people are seeing record setting profits, but then you're told that you only get 2 weeks of PTO, or that you have to come into the office 5 days a week because we're an in-office culture. That is where companies are it's just like a nail in the coffin every time.
Yeah. So if a manager listening right now feels completely overwhelmed by everything we've discussed, what's one tangible action or mindset shift that they can implement tomorrow morning to start leading with more intention?
That's a good question. I think it's about, again, remembering the decision that you get to make today is, who do you want to be tomorrow? And I think that it's about sitting down and going, do I want to be this version of me tomorrow? So if you're feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling like unsupported and you're feeling those things, what's something that you can do to not feel that way? Take one small action to not feel that way tomorrow. Or come find me and we'll work through it.
Ask for help. Like you were saying, ask for help.
Yep.
So finally, before we end the episode, you say that the best leaders never stop learning. And I 100% agree. I think I just did a post on this, but I fully believe that one of the easiest ways to get ahead in life is to be a lifelong learner.
Yes.
So what are you learning about leadership right now that's challenging or exciting to you?
I'm really diving into, I launched on TikTok and Instagram, I launched a series about bullying,
Yeah.
which was really interesting. That was all based on feedback from a video I had put in, and I was inundated with comments about people feeling bullied at work. And I didn't know it was the epidemic that it is. I was shocked to learn about what's going on. And I still have people reaching out every single day. And for me, it's about learning how, for me, I'm really invested in learning about like, how can we name it? Because I think I think the word is thrown around kind of loosey goosey.
Yeah.
So how can we name it? And then how can we combat it? How can we face it? And again, I talked earlier about like, we have to give it a name. And I think that so often in the workplace, it's just like, well, that's just how it is. That's how you earn your stripes. Well, it's not about that. And it's about how can we give it a name? How can we define it? And then how can we help eradicate it? Like, what are we doing to stop that behavior? So I'm really like diving in deep on that and trying to understand and help name it and help eradicate it.
I think that's huge. I mean, if you haven't seen Lynda's series on bullying, go check out her TikTok at Lynda with a Y .leads. She dives really well into this topic of bullying. And I think that, to your point, the word bullying is something that people like shying away from isn't even the right term, but it's a taboo kind of thing because it is a strong word, right? And we think about, when we think about it in the context of what it was at school, like it's this really strong word. And when we bring it into the workplace, I think a lot of leaders just kind of run away from it and keep it taboo. But you do a good job of pointing it out and really naming it, because I think it is absolutely something that is prominent in the workplace that we just kind of dance around.
Yeah.
So thank you. Well, Lynda, this has been such an insightful conversation, and I'm so grateful that you joined us today. There's so much that we can dive into when it comes to management and leadership, but we're out of time, and I know you have to get back to helping us solve this management crisis. So thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate the insights that you've shared. And I think we have to bring you back for another episode because there's so much more nuance that we can dive into.
Well, thank you so much. This was a pleasure. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I think that if we hit it on from the internal perspective and we hit it from the external perspective, we're going to meet somewhere in the middle and we're going to change the world. I just know it.
Hopefully before we die, before our time is up in this world, we make a big enough ripple.
I love that. Yes.
Thank you, Lynda. So for people who want to connect with you, for people who want to learn more about what you're doing, learn more about the insights and the nuances that you work with managers on, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
So I would love everyone to find me on TikTok. It's Lynda, and that's Lynda spelled with a Y, but that's not how it's just Lynda .leads on TikTok. So I would love for you to come find me there. On Instagram, it's Who is Lynda? Again, Lynda with a Y. So come find me. I have a community that I host on the platform School, and it's for people who want to go through leadership training and really don't know where to start. So I really want them to come join me in my management community. I'm trying to build a community where people feel safe and feel included, but also get the help that they need. And then they can bounce ideas off each other. So come find me there. Of course, I'm on like LinkedIn and all the things, but those are the places I really want people to come find me.
And if you are a new manager or even a very experienced manager, this is one of the best investments that you can make in terms of your career development, because it is a very, very, very real problem that we're facing right now with managers not being equipped to navigate and be effective and be successful and really feel a sense of fulfillment in the role and the impact that a manager can have. So if you have the opportunity today to invest in something that's going to set you up for success and really help you do that well, this is one of those things. So definitely go check out Lynda's TikTok. Again, that's at Lynda with a Y .leads on TikTok, and join her community.
Yeah. I can't wait to see everybody there.
Thanks, Lynda.